RealAg Live.
Hey, welcome to RealAg Live. Kara Oosterhuis here. I am sitting in the seat of the Sean Haney. I'm here today to talk to you about canola, and I have here with me Gregory Sekulic, who is an agronomy specialist with the Canola Council of Canada. How is it going today?
It is awesome, almost.
Almost.
Yeah, I came all the way down from the Boreal foothills where it's not windy and there is in fact shade. And here on the just horrific arid plains of southern Canada, it's
Welcome to Lethbridge, Alberta, folks. The wind blows. I know I was just saying earlier that I remember hearing, I've never been a super girly girl, and people used to always say, I love getting my hair blown out. And I'm like, why would you do that? Like, I don't understand. And then today it hit me, and I was like, it doesn't make sense to me because the wind always blows here. That's not a concept. Yeah. So, anyways, enough on my hairstyle and where Greg lives. We are here to talk about all things canola. So please send all your questions in, whether you're watching on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube, even on Twitch. We are on Twitch TV. So if you gamers out there are watching us right now, please send in all your comments because we would love to hear them. Just put them into that little question box and we'll get right at them. So the first topic we're going to hit on today, something very important to the Canola Council, and it is a 4R nutrient or management plan. Can you, before we get too far into that, can you talk a bit about what 4R even is?
So the 4R nutrient plans are not new to the industry, actually, and there's a pretty substantial portion, a little over 10% of growers are actually registered in official 4R nutrient management programs, but like 50 to 60% are actually doing the 4R principles on their field, even though they aren't actually registered in it. So this is actually something you're going to see a lot of extensionists, particularly at the Canola Council over the next couple of years, really pushing, is just the need to really have those, well, first perform the 4Rs, which is the right place, the right rate, the right form.
The right form?
The right form and the right...
Oh, I don't know. What's
I literally just spaced on the fourth one. So if someone could comment that for us.
Because neither of us know what the fourth R is. So if you guys have, please send it this way. But anyways, keep going.
But huge implications basically for both emissions coming off the field and that really is like the largest ecological footprint of crop production, annual crop production in particular, is fertility. So the more we can increase the efficiency of the fertilizer we're using, the better our footprint is going to be, and that's really going to be a home run as far as it goes with market access and really meeting what consumers want in their sustainably sourced foods. 4R is just such a fantastic underpinning of the entire program. And secondly, we are actually quite convinced that the Western Canadian canola crop is chronically under-fertilized. So what this will actually help with is, more timely and frequent soil sampling with more timely and more applicable fertility recommendations on a field-by-field basis, so that we can, again, glean the most efficiency out of those fertilizer applications, maximize our yield and profit, as well as reduce our emissions. So it's really a win-win for the entire industry, but particularly for canola. As well, it's once we start doing some nutrient mapping and potentially some variable rating, we can start to identify some of the regions in the field where we've been over applying, yet the yields haven't really been there. So we can take those areas perhaps out of production and put them into some sort of natural state, a grass pasture, a bluff, a tree bluff, a forest bluff, basically anything that's uncultivated, and just avoid losing the money on those input applications on those areas that never really do return a yield properly, and really devote more of that energy to getting a higher yield in the part of the field where the yield potential is better.
Absolutely. So Jay Wetter here has your answer to your question. The 4 R's: right rate, right time, right place, and right source.
Yes. Source and form are the one that always bind me up when I'm
It'll get you.
Yeah.
And it looks like Lindsay actually has a question here for us. Surprise, surprise, because she's always full of questions. If anyone knows Lindsay, so she says, "Remember when grain bags were super cool? And remember how you told ravens no when it came to packing on the bags with electrical tape? Did that work?"
Actually, yes, it did work. Ravens are evidently the most intelligent of birds.
Mm.
While I, despise the proximity of birds, I am a fan of their existence. Uh, and this was actually on my brother and sister's farm, brother and sister-in-law's farm. Sorry, back home. Ravens had gotten into was actually an oat bag in that particular
Mm.
case. So I went through with some colored duct tape and patched it up, and put a warning to the ravens that Lindsay remembered, and obviously I did not. But yeah, that did solve the problem. They actually did move on to greener pastures.
Awesome. So, birds. This is going to be a weird segue. Bees. How did they do over the winter last year? What sort of you're passionate about beneficials and pollinators? What can you tell me about the bees? How they did?
So the Canadian Association of Professional Apiculturalists, CAPA for short, released their annual overwintering bee loss report a little bit later than usual, but this is the new normal. These are unprecedented times, and yes, we did actually see some elevated overwintering losses to bees, which unfortunately was not unexpected, given the winter that we had that was particularly long and brutal. But even more so, extremely variable in the spring. So as the bees were already um, hibernating, wrapped up for a longer period than usual, the weather in the end of March and beginning in April got just absolutely atrocious again at a time of the year when they would be out leaving the hive and foraging again. So we really did see those numbers spike alarmingly in some cases. So the average loss for Canada was just over 30%, which is definitely higher than what we target. The industry actually targets about a 15% overwintering loss. Varied across the country though. Alberta was kind of one of the more harder hit regions, and again, given the winter that we had, that was not unexpected. But beekeepers have really become fantastic at managing those losses and turning those 1/3 of their hives lost over winter and into new hives the next year. So we did see a little bit of a decline in the absolute number of bee colonies in Canada over the last 2 years or so, but nowhere near as much as we would have worried, given that we saw the pretty substantial losses that we had.
So obviously, with the Canola Council, you do have your territory that you cover, but you do cover a lot of ground. What sorts of things did you see for diseases this year?
So I actually had to get way outside of my immediate area this year just to see anything beyond water stress and water damage. The south and central Peace regions were just inundated with rains in June. That the number one diagnostic issue that I had was yes, it absolutely rained too much, and that's atrocious. To get further north, though, up into the high level Lacrete, Carcajou areas of like the far north of the Peace, the prolonged drought that they had in northern Alberta really did seem to end this. Well, it didn't seem to end. It certainly ended. Um, and so with that, we saw a pretty substantial increase in the amount of sclerotinia in canola, especially in the north. So I did a bit of an ad hoc survey up there in the early part of September. And while the yield potentials were the best that I'd seen since I joined council in 2011,
Wow.
it also correlated with a pretty substantial increase in the amount of sclerotinia as well. So sclerotinia is just one of those just horrific diseases that can do astronomical damage. I would guess the handful of fields that I was in, is 8 or 10. About the lowest infection that I saw was 35 or 40%. And we could pretty much translate that out into like 18 to 20% yield loss right off the bat, just from that. And there were worse fields than that as well. But there was a little bit of a reluctance amongst growers in the north to be applying fungicide this year, especially given that it had been 5 years of pretty extreme drought in some cases.
Mm-hmm.
So the fear, I guess, was that there wouldn't have been enough inoculum in the ground to actually infect the plants to get that level of severity.
Yeah.
And sclerotinia is just one of those ubiquitous diseases. It's everywhere. It affects over 200 species of plants, basically every broadleaf plant that we grow. And broadleaf plants aren't confined just to the inside of the field; they're outside the field as well. So the largest portion of the disease triangle, which is the environment, the plants, and the pathogen, is by far and away the environment. When you've got the environment and the conditions for it, it doesn't matter how long it's been since you've had the disease. It doesn't matter what your rotation has been, unfortunately. If it is a broadleaf plant and it is humid and there is a yield potential of a crop, you're going to see pretty substantial sclerotinia, and we sure did. So just moving further south, again, like the central parts of the province had some pretty aggressive water damage, but I haven't actually seen the results of the prairie surveys yet. So for diseases, just talking to my team, it did seem to be less of a disease year than normal. So hopefully we'll have seen substantially reduced, blacklegs and verticilliums and even sclerotinias on the rest of the prairies.
So if you're seeing a bad sclerotinia year this year, is there anything that producers can kind of plan for next year heading into the season?
Yeah, about the best advice I can give for sclerotinia is not to spray for last year. Every year is its own kettle of fish. The statistics or the probabilities, I should say, of the infection are completely unrelated to what happened last year, the year before, or the year before that. So it's probably on an annual basis, it's probably the most yield impacting disease that we have, just because we can find it on pretty much any field in Canada that's got even a little bit of moisture throughout the year.
And how early in the year can you actually be scouting for it?
For the actual plant symptoms, unfortunately, well after you would be able to do anything about it, because obviously the fungicides in this case are preventative. So we need to make that decision in the month of July while we're flowering, and early on in that month as well, where the plants can look completely healthy, and maybe we're not 100% sure of what our yield potential is going to be. But that's even the forecasting models that we have aren't really the greatest at predicting what that field infection is going to look like. The one for field peas was developed while I was an agronomist in the Westlock area. We used to call it the Lopometer. Ken Lopatinsky was one of the curators of that. And it's once you've used it a couple times and have those numbers squared away, when you're in excess of the threshold, I believe it's 65 points on the checklist, you spray like the second you cross that list, and I've never seen it fail. Whereas sclerotinia has ruined people's careers trying to do it, because it doesn't adhere well to anything except its own viciousness, I guess.
So if you happen to be having a really late year this year and you're just getting to your canola now, can you be looking at those stems now? Like, can you talk about the importance of clipping and really looking at those stems post harvest?
Broadly, yes. So in terms of diagnostics post harvest, you can tell the difference between these diseases in some cases. Sclerotinia is going to really just shred and fall apart as you twist it off. But unfortunately, that's in like the worst, most affected plants are going to have enough stubble left that actually has sclerotinia on it. Usually, that infection is going to be much higher in the canopy, and you'll have seen that from the swather or the combine, or as the case may be. However, pulling roots out and snipping them is actually after harvest. Is a little later than ideal, but definitely not too late. If you've got a clubroot situation, sometimes by the time we get into October, those clubs and galls are starting to fall apart. But they do have a really peaty, mealy, stinky. It's a horrific thing. But they do fall apart as they come out of the ground. But there's definitely something wrong with those roots. Like you can see the remains of the galls on them, even if they are falling apart. It will be a proof positive. Unfortunately, there's no real proof negative in the field for clubroot, but there is a proof positive, and that's good there. Blackleg, again, as we get out past harvest, the ideal time to be scouting for it is around that 60% color change or so, because that's when the blackening in the stem is going to be the most diagnostically valuable.
Mm-hmm.
But moving out into the Octobers and even Novembers, or even next year, if you've got nice, clean, white, pithy stems, you can be reasonably confident that plant had no disease, and no disease also means no blackleg. Mm-hmm. So like you can proof negative that a little bit. There are some like saprophytic fungi that will move into the cut plants after they've completely senesced and are drying up. So there could be some blackleg. There could be some other fungus that I don't even know the names of. There could be some verticillium, some gray stem moving through. So it gets actually really difficult to distinguish between some of these when we're doing stem clippings and whatnot that long after harvest. But a clean stem is a clean stem.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not shredding, if it's not falling apart, if there's no fruiting structures on the side, if there's no pycnidia, if there's no apothecia, you got a healthy plant there. You probably did something right, and
Yeah.
you can pour yourself a beer.
Absolutely. So you touched a bit on Clubroute, but I don't really feel like we can have a discussion on canola without talking about Clubroute. What were numbers looking like this year, and what did the kind of geographical area look like?
Well, we're gonna have to kind of wait for the actual surveys to come out and see exactly how much further it's gone. But yes, Clubroute is going to continue its inexorable march across Canada. It's moving further into the already infested municipalities on the fringe areas, so in the north, in the south, in the east, into Saskatchewan as well. Northern Manitoba, southern Manitoba against the Northwest Territories border. It's only going to continue spreading. I wish I had better news than that, but I really don't. The management strategies that we are putting together now are kind of the ones that we were proposing looking at almost 20 years ago when my former colleague now Dan Orchard invented the disease in Sturgeon County. We were combing the literature for other treatments globally that we could potentially use to stop or slow the spread. And being a soil-borne disease, we really didn't think it was going to spread that rapidly in 2003. Like, we identified a small handful of fields, and that was kind of the end of it, we thought. And obviously that wasn't the case. But some of the liming, for example, there were some indications out of the global literature that suggested higher pH soils couldn't get the disease. Well, that we kind of proved that wrong as soon as they got into Thorhill County and to some 7.5 and 7.8 pH soils, and its severity was every bit as bad. And the cost of liming an entire field specifically for Clubroute is a little on the prohibitive side, specifically for one disease. Especially seeing as in some of these cases in the black and gray soil zones, we've got soils that are 5.5, 5.8, and well below 6. So the amount of lime that we need to raise that pH up to a minimum of 7.2 actually gets pretty cost prohibitive.
Mm-hmm.
So like multiple tons per acre. And you also start running into some nutrient availability issues as well. Like my preferred pH is going to be in the low 6s. That's when the solubility and availability of most of our nutrients are going to be at or near their peak. Over 7, we start running into some availability problems with phosphorus in particular. And we do have a bit of a phosphorus crisis in Western Canada. We have been for the longest time chronically under fertilizing with phosphorus, and we are seeing those long-term both inorganic and organic numbers fall, which really does negatively impact our profitability as well. So again, all these things really do tie in together. But back to Clubroute. We aren't really looking at liming entire sections anymore, because if we're at a point where we've got a field that's got hundreds of millions of spores per gram, we got more problems than pH, quite frankly. But if we're in the fringe areas where we're just starting to find the disease, and it's year one maybe where we've got a few dead plants at the field entrance, or on the leeward side of a hill somewhere, what we can do is go out to those areas and delineate what the infected area, and then times it by 2 basically, and then take that out of production. So instead of trying to treat 300 acres or 80 acres or however many acres, we're just doing 2 or 3 right at the entrance. And especially if it's at the entrance, which is again 90% of the time we find the disease, we find it at the field entrance. So we can take an acre or 2 out of production there, put it into grass of some sort, lime it aggressively to really help drive those spore viabilities down substantially, and then continue monitoring it. We've really taken the problem area out of that field, and then switching to a resistant variety for the rest of the field if we haven't already. Hopefully, if you're in a municipality that's been confirmed with the disease, you're growing resistant material now. But that's I'm aware that's not always the case. But now the rest of the field, and actually the rest of your farm, needs to be resistant material.
Yep.
And we can, again, in a lot of cases, we're going to need to lengthen the rotation. We need a minimum of 2 crops between canola to drive down those spore counts. more is better for a number of reasons, but from a statistical perspective, a 2-year break is about the same as a 3-year break, which is about the same as a 4-year break in terms of the amount of spore reduction. But again, when we're in these fields that have hundreds of millions of spores per gram, the selection pressure to overcome our resistance sources is just astronomical. So we need to start doing more than just switching to a resistant variety and keeping everything else status quo. We've got to deal with the patches, potentially start playing around with some fungicides and some different fumigation treatments and whatnot. These are not cost effective on a broad scale, but on smaller acreages, they can work quite well.
So your colleague Autumn Barnes once told me that with Clubroute, it's not a matter of if you get it, it's a matter of when you get it. Can you talk about the importance of, if you're, there's a lot of people that, like, for example, Southern Alberta, they're like, we don't have Clubroute here. Can you talk about the importance of managing it before you get it?
Well, Clubroute is just a real jerk. Like it's been moving outside of the Sturgeon and Parkland counties at a rate of 20 to 30 kilometers per year, and so eventually it's going to move just with soil movement in the wind, possibly deer, possibly even ravens.
Yeah, possibly even ravens. That's a good point.
No audience, no call back here.
Yeah.
But it is a matter of time. So what we can be doing on our fields that aren't infested yet is just preventing the introduction. First and foremost, clean equipment when it comes from a different region. Especially if you bought used equipment from another part of the province, another part of the prairies, make sure it is decontaminated and sterilized when it gets to your place. Even between your own fields, if you've started seeing a patch or two here and there, you're going to want to leave those fields that are known infested to maybe the last part of your planting strategy. Move to those at the end. When you're coming off these fields, actually, when you're coming off any field, it's always best to assume that you have the disease. So what you're going to want to do is, just knock off the low hanging fruits, the loose mud, the loose dirt, like clean off the openers, the shanks, the whatever, between the wheels, wherever dirt can pile up. If you can remove 90% of the soil from that piece of equipment and that tractor, that combine, whatever, you're also going to reduce the risk of introduction to the next field by that proportionate amount.
Yeah.
So fortunately, the easiest step is also the one that pays the most dividends. The next step from that is one that we're going to want to see pretty much only when we're coming out of fields that we know are infected into fields that may not be, and that's pressure washing. So just like plain up pressure washing, getting the rest of that soil off so we can get up to 95 to 99% of that soil washed off. Again, we're going to reduce the risk by that same 95 to 99% or so. That's probably not practical on a field-to-field basis, especially in spring. It takes 4 or 5 hours to pressure wash a seeding equipment or a seed drill in the spring, which is extremely hard to do. To have a producer on the side of the field while his neighbors are going up and down planting, however many acres an hour, and he's sitting there, getting nooks and crannies. I've seen it happen a couple times, but given the number of fields that are infested, I'm not very many as a proportion at all. The last phase, however, though, is going to be like a complete decontamination, and that's going to be spraying that equipment down anywhere soil could have ever touched with a 2% bleach solution.
Wow.
And leaving that wet for 10 to 15 minutes at least, probably at least 15 minutes, to really kill those spores. The spores are extremely hardy, extremely long lived. Just like I said, they're just a real jerk. But you need a lot of bleach to do it, basically. So commercial bleach that we can buy over the counter is about 4% hypochlorite solution or so, and we want to use 2%. So you're going to wreck your pants when you are decontaminating properly. Like there's no way it's not going to happen.
I don't know. The 80s are coming back, so the acid wash 90s, them might be okay. We might be starting a trend here.
We are through the looking glass here,
yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's like the most important means of preventing introduction. That's just soil from field to field, first and foremost. Again, like I mentioned, that minimum of a 2-year break between canola crops is good for a whole lot of biodiversity reasons, not just pathology. So we really do want to see more time between canola crops in these cases, especially if we're even a little bit at risk of clubroot. That 2-year break does seem to be as good as a 3-year break. So at least getting like one more crop in that rotation. If you're a cereal canola guy, add another cereal. I love malt barley. I'm a wild consumer of the malt product, but so please maintain the supply. Pulses, anything else we can throw in that rotation to stretch it out, you bet.
So let's move, I guess, into fall as we've been talking. But lots of times when we think stand establishment, we think spring, we think, going through the field once that crop's coming up. Can you talk about stand establishment from the fall perspective?
Stand establishment starts the straw chopper. I will never not say that. A nice uniform spread of material that covers the full width of the header, the swather, or the combine, whichever it should happen to be, is at the absolute first step in getting a good plant population next year. For those who've seen me speak before or who know me even a little bit, you'll be aware that I'm a little bit of a zero-till zealot. So it's absolutely horrific to me to see the amount of fall field work that's been happening over the last few years. In a few cases, I guess I can understand the impetus for it, but I just there are better ways of dealing with that much residue than going and working it up. Quite frankly, the biggest enemy to zero-till in Canada is an open fall. I don't really. It's something that we've seen time and again that it's 2 months after harvest, and we see producers just kind of going back into their habits. And with the proliferation of high-speed disc equipment that's out there, it's evidently a very fun activity. But in most cases, I'm going to say it's probably not worth it. Even harrowing, it's pretty rare that I've been in a situation where I would advise harrowing as a means of solving a problem. It's usually trying to rectify a problem coming off the back of the chopper. So that's a little bit of my own zealotry coming out there. But again, so that's prepping for next year, coming out of whatever crop you happen to be going into canola next year. But we can also evaluate this year's stands, and the best time to do it is post harvest, actually, because we can go out and with a 38 centimeter hoop, or even if we know what our row spacings are, go out and count the number of plants that are out there. Yep. If we've managed to get that 5 to 8 plants survived the entire season from planting all the way through to harvest, we've done a really good job. And your stand establishment is great. You don't need to really improve anything. We're really looking for the outcome here. As long as you're achieving that minimum of 5 to 8 plants per square foot, and especially if they're uniform, that's even better. Keep doing what you're doing. But if we're seeing some patchy emergence, or if we're getting down below that 5 plants per square foot average or so, really need to start addressing what's happening in the spring. Maybe we need to increase seeding rates if replacing equipment isn't viable in the short term. A few extra dollars an acre in seeds will help fill that gap in the short term for sure, and really help maximize that yield potential. Yeah.
Awesome. Lindsay says here, okay, that's great, but how will farm kids learn to drive tractors if we can't harrow? Learn how to drive tractors if we can't harrow. If they can't get on that tractor and harrow, like you're saying not to do, how will they learn how to drive the tractor?
I feel like yes, if the kids can do the on the electric computer machines,
yeah, whatever those kids do on the machines, yeah.
if they could figure that out, I'm sure they could figure out the auto steer on a piece of equipment. Obviously, I learned how to drive a tractor harrowing, and I think the bruises are just starting to go down from the amount of misses and overlaps that I'd left. But thankfully, we're not in that situation anymore. We've got technology that's solved that problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Or just send them out on the deck mower; they'll be fine.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah. Yes. So we're talking fertilizing too. Can you talk about how it's important when we're fertilizing to tailor to each field, to not just look at your overall canola crop, but to look at how each field did?
So that's really like one of the R's in the 4R. That's the right rate for the right field. So when we've surveyed growers in the past, and the Roundtable for Sustainable Crops did a similar survey asking what producers' fertilization practices were, if they were variable from field to field, or if they were if they were tailor-made for each field. And that's, again, the right rate is hugely important in achieving these maximum yields. Now, that being said, I'm not completely against having a canola blend, especially if it's something that comes pretty, as long as those ratios that you have in your blend can be tailored specifically from field to field, because we really don't want to be over applying nutrients that we don't need, but by that same token, we don't want to be under applying the ones that we do.
Yep.
And so having an individual fertility plan for each field really does allow us to maximize that potential and reduce the wastage completely. So it's Uh, I know it's a little bit of one of the targets is under the like this is the Roundtable for Sustainable Crops is to have a different fertilizer blend for each field. But in some cases, I'm going to say that that's if we're within a pound or two on some of the less mobile nutrients on some fields that are close to each other with similar histories and similar soil chemistries, it really doesn't make sense to me to have a blend that's only 1 to 2 pounds difference in a major macronutrient. Nature, I've discovered, really doesn't care about 10 pounds in terms of yield. But but definitely just want to be making sure that if there is a blend, that it's tailored, to address the minimum needs of each field for sure.
And what about sulfur? Can it be fall applied?
Of all the nutrients that can be fall applied, I'm most comfortable with sulfur and potassium. I'm not really a huge fan of fall fertilization for a number of reasons, mostly loss based. Um, I'm aware of the logistical challenges of trying to get hundreds of pounds an acre down in the spring. But from an efficiency perspective, it just makes so much more sense to put it down in the spring at the time of planting. Yeah, for yield potential, fertilizer use efficiency, all of these things. Uh, Obviously, there are some financial incentives to planting or to banding in the fall. Frequently, fertilizer has been cheaper in October than it is in April, and again, that's probably logistically based. And even like I said, the logistics do make it challenging. But the ones that are least subject to loss and the ones that are not needed until later on in the especially canola's growth stage are going to be potassium and sulfur, and they're also the saltiest of the products that we use on a regular basis. So actually, there is a good case to be made for pulling those out of the seed row and applying those at a separate time, so that we do increase our seed safety and increase the increase the plant counts at the end of the year, and again, maximize our yield. But yeah, the potassium and sulfur are if a person really does need to be doing like a separate pass of fertilizer, those would be the ones that I would start with pulling out of the main blend and doing it in a separate pass.
So you are a big proponent of beneficial insects. We are starting to run out of time here, but I feel like I know it's time flies when you're having fun. But I feel like I can't let you go without asking what is your favorite beneficial insect and why?
Oh, as a family, it would be crab beetles.
Yeah, and why?
They're just awesome.
Look at that smile, see?
So they're amongst the most diverse family of insects that we have in Canada. So we've identified nearly 400 of them in Canada. And all of them are beneficial at best or neutral at worst. Like we don't really have a carabid beetle that is pestilent in any way whatsoever. The diversity is astronomical. One of my mentors, the late Lloyd Dosdall, indicated that in any 2 hectare survey that we've done, we'll find a minimum of 50 species of crowd beetles on any field in Western Canada, and that's just a fabulous biodiversity story for us. They're such a fantastic family of insects. So just from the like that indicator species perspective alone, they're really really cool. But more importantly, is the absolutely astronomical amount of pest species they will eat. So when we ran the Canolabs, and some of you are probably old enough to remember the Canolabs,
yeah. Producer Jay is giving us the signal.
Good times. We used to have a segment that we called the Arena of Death, which was hands down my favorite section, and it really does make you understand the Romans with the lion den and the carnage and the feeding and the bedding, because we would have groups of farmers standing around the table like screaming and yelling and taking bets, completely unfacilitated by myself, on who would win the fight between cutworms and aphids and crowd beetles. And we had one aggressive little bugger. Actually, I can't even say little because he was
pretty sizable.
Yeah, for a crab beetle.
Yeah.
We kind of antagonized it a little bit. We had it in a cage and played loud punk rock music at it and said unkind things and shook it around a lot. And then put it into the ring with these cutworms, and after a while didn't even need a partner. Over the course of 4 sessions in the afternoon in Wolves, this thing demolished about 10 or 11 cutworms, and after a while I stopped even eating them. It was just ripping them apart. I've got video. Hit me up afterwards. I'll send it to you. I love it. I watch it every night before I go to sleep. It's one of my favorite things.
Every night before I go to sleep. Oh my God. So there it is. If you're wondering how Greg sleeps at night, it is the Arena of Death.
On giant piles of crab photos. those.
Awesome. Okay, well, that is unfortunately all the time we have today. It has sped right up. We do actually have a couple. Before we go, I'll read you some of the comments that were going on in our comment section because it Lindsay and Jay Wetter were having some fun here. So looks like Jay's commenting on here about how Dan Orchard invented the disease of Clubroute, so that's a good time. Brian Voth joined in with us, and he says, I missed the start of Gregor, but luckily he missed the start of it, but Lindsay said there was a Scotch tasting, so yeah, whoever missed out at the beginning, you missed the Scotch tasting. What are you doing? And Brian says, of course, he'd expect nothing less out of us, clearly. Jadad wrote, we need more canola to make Canada great again. And Lindsay, of course, is commenting on our computer machines. So that's what we have here today. But thanks again for tuning in with us today. It was great to have you all along for the ride. It is always so much fun. And we love to talk agronomy, love to talk insects, love to talk about our yellow flower that we grow. So thanks for joining us, and we will talk to you soon.